They performed brain surgery. They built machines we still can't explain. They calculated the circumference of the Earth with terrifying accuracy. And then, for over 1,000 years, the world forgot everything they knew. This isn't science fiction. This is ancient Egypt. And what happened to their knowledge is one of history's greatest tragedies. But here's what nobody tells you. Some of that knowledge never actually disappeared. It was hidden, buried, and in some cases deliberately destroyed. If you want to discover things that ancient Egypt mastered thousands of years before the modern world, hit the subscribe button, because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you see ancient history. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. Let's get into it. Picture this. You're in ancient Egypt around 2600 BCE. That's 4,600 years ago. Your skull has been fractured in battle, and pressure is building inside your head. You're dying. A physician approaches. He has instruments made of copper and bronze, and he's about to perform a procedure that modern doctors didn't attempt until the 1800s. He's going to drill into your skull. This procedure is called trepanation, and we have the skulls to prove the Egyptians did it. But here's where it gets interesting. These patients survived. We know because the bones show signs of healing after the surgery. The Egyptians weren't just hacking holes in skulls and hoping for the best. They understood intracranial pressure. They knew about infection control. They had survival protocols. The Edwin Smith papyrus, dating to around 1600 BCE, but copying from texts possibly 1,000 years older, describes 48 different surgical cases. It reads like a modern medical textbook. Each case follows the same structure: title, examination, diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. It describes the brain, the meninges, and cerebrospinal fluid, using terminology that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. Case number 6 describes a gaping wound in the head with a compound fracture and broken skull. The text calmly explains how to examine the patient, how to feel the fracture with your fingers, how to assess brain injury. The physician is told to say, "An ailment I will treat." They knew the brain controlled the body. They observed that injuries to one side of the head caused paralysis on the opposite side of the body. They documented it. They studied it. And then the knowledge vanished. But let's go deeper. The Egyptians didn't just do brain surgery. They performed eye surgery, including cataract operations. They set broken bones with splints that look remarkably similar to modern casts. They practiced dentistry, drilling teeth and filling cavities with a mineral mixture. One mummy, dating to 2100 BCE, has a dental bridge made of gold wire. The Ebers Papyrus, another medical text, contains over 700 remedies and magical formulas. But don't let the word magical fool you. Mixed in with the incantations are genuine pharmaceutical compounds. They used willow bark for pain relief, the same plant from which we derive aspirin. They used honey as an antibiotic, something modern medicine has only recently validated. They used moldy bread on wounds, anticipating penicillin by 3,000 years. Egyptian physicians were specialists. There were dentists, ophthalmologists, gastroenterologists, and even a shepherd of the anus, which was essentially a proctologist. Specialization indicates an advanced understanding of medicine as a complex field requiring focused expertise. So how did they develop this knowledge? Through something we'd recognize today: empirical observation and documentation. The Egyptians were obsessive record keepers. Every treatment, every outcome, every symptom was written down. They built a medical database that spanned centuries. And when that database was destroyed, medicine went backward for over a millennium.
Let's talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza. You've seen it in documentaries, you've heard the statistics, but let me give you one that'll make you pause. The base of the Great Pyramid is level to within 2.1 centimeters across a base of 230 meters, built 4,500 years ago with copper tools. That's a margin of error of 0.009%. Modern construction, with laser levels and computer-aided design, aims for tolerances 10 times less precise. How? The answer lies in Egyptian mathematics, and it was far more sophisticated than most people realize. The Rhind mathematical papyrus and the Moscow mathematical papyrus show us that Egyptian mathematicians could calculate the area of a circle with remarkable accuracy, compute the volume of a truncated pyramid, and solve complex algebraic equations. They understood pi. The Rhind papyrus uses a value of approximately 3.16, which is only 0.6% off the true value. They didn't have decimal points, yet they were doing calculations that required fractional precision. Here's something even more remarkable. They used a base 10 number system, just like we do. They had symbols for 1, 10, 100, 1,000, all the way up to 1 million. They could add, subtract, multiply, and divide. They understood fractions, which they expressed as sums of unit fractions, a method that seems cumbersome to us, but which they wielded with incredible skill. But the real genius shows up in their engineering. The Great Pyramid isn't just level, it's astronomically aligned. The four sides face the cardinal directions with an average error of only 3 arc minutes. That's 1/20th of a degree. So what happened? How does 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge just vanish? The answer is more complex and more tragic than you might think. It wasn't one event. It was a slow erosion over centuries, punctuated by catastrophic losses. First, you have to understand how Egyptian knowledge was transmitted. Unlike later civilizations that relied heavily on written texts, much of Egyptian knowledge was passed down orally through apprenticeships and temple schools. The master physician taught the student physician. The master engineer taught the apprentice. The astronomer priest taught the next generation. The system works beautifully as long as the institutions remain intact, but it's incredibly fragile. Break the chain of transmission, and the knowledge disappears in a single generation. The first major break came with the Persian conquest in 525 BCE. The Persians weren't particularly interested in Egyptian culture. They saw Egypt as a resource to be exploited. Many temples were closed, priesthoods were dispersed, and the institutional framework that preserved knowledge began to crack. Then came Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. The Greeks were fascinated by Egypt, but they also fundamentally misunderstood it. They interpreted Egyptian religion through a Greek lens, creating hybrid gods and rewriting history. The Ptolemaic dynasty that followed spoke Greek, not Egyptian. The administrative language changed. The old temple schools continued, but they were increasingly marginalized. The Library of Alexandria, founded by Ptolemy I, was supposed to preserve all human knowledge. It probably held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, many containing Egyptian texts translated into Greek. But here's the problem. Translation is interpretation. Nuance is lost. Technical terminology gets simplified. The Greek scholars who translated Egyptian texts often didn't understand what they were translating. But here's the thing, not everything was lost. The knowledge dispersed, transformed, and survived in unexpected ways. When Islamic scholars began translating Greek texts in the 8th and 9th centuries, they encountered Egyptian knowledge that had been filtered through Greek and Roman writers. They refined it, built upon it, and passed it to medieval Europe. The mathematics survived in geometric principles and astronomical calculations. The medicine survived in herbal remedies and surgical techniques. The engineering survived in architectural principles and construction methods.
Even the language survived, transformed into Coptic, which is still used in the Coptic Christian Church today. But what should haunt us is how much didn't survive. How much knowledge was lost that we've had to slowly, painfully rediscover over the past few centuries. How many medical breakthroughs, engineering solutions, and scientific insights vanished in the smoke of burning libraries and abandoned temples. The fall of Egyptian knowledge is a warning. It shows us how fragile civilization is, how easily accumulated knowledge can disappear, how institutional collapse leads to intellectual collapse. We like to think of human progress as a steady upward climb, but history shows us it's more like a roller coaster. We climb, we plateau, sometimes we plummet. The Dark Ages weren't a myth. For centuries, European civilization knew less about medicine, mathematics, and engineering than the Egyptians had known 2,000 years earlier.
This should terrify us, because it can happen again. Every time a library closes, every time research funding is cut, every time education is devalued, we risk losing knowledge. And in our digital age, we might be even more vulnerable than the Egyptians were. At least their knowledge was written on stone and papyrus. Ours is stored on servers and hard drives that could become unreadable in decades. But the story of Egypt also gives us hope, because even after everything was lost, even after the civilization collapsed and the language died, we found a way to read it again. We found a way to recover at least some of what they knew. The Egyptians built for eternity. They carved their knowledge in stone, hoping it would last forever. Most of it didn't, but enough survived to show us what's possible, to show us what humans can achieve when given time, resources, and the freedom to think. So the next time you see a pyramid or a mummy or a hieroglyphic inscription, remember, you're not just looking at ancient artifacts, you're looking at the surviving fragments of one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. And you're looking at a reminder to preserve, protect, and pass on what we know. Because if we don't, future generations might be looking at our ruins the same way we look at Egypt's, wondering what knowledge we possessed and how we lost it all. If this video changed how you think about ancient Egypt and the fragility of human knowledge, make sure you're subscribed. We've got more hidden history coming that'll blow your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.